Hello, everybody. Nick Offerman here. I watch MacBreak Weekly I can't pull that off. Each and every week, MacBreak Weekly brings you the best Apple news. We have combined all of the best bits from 2019. Enjoy. MacBreak Weekly comes to you from the LastPass Studios in beautiful Petaluma, California. Securing every access point in your company doesn't have to be a challenge. LastPass unifies access and authentication to make securing your employees simple and secure. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit. This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 694 for New Year's Eve, Tuesday, December 31st, 2019. The year's best. MacBreak Weekly is brought to you by Cachefly. Give your users the seamless online experience they want. Power your site or app with Cachefly's content delivery network and be 30% faster than the competition. Learn more at twit.cachefly.com. So we're going to do this, everybody, in chronological order. This goes back to earlier in the year, the springtime, when Apple released News Plus. So I subscribe to the New Yorker app. The experience in the New Yorker app is very different if you compare that to this experience of the New Yorker on Apple's News Plus. You'll get the same New Yorker typeface, which is nice. If you open the magazine, you get a cover. This is that new Apple interface where you kind of get a table of contents. But when you want to read it, maybe you don't swipe it. Okay, you have to tap it.
Tap on,
okay,
yeah.
So it is actually, New Yorker has done something different than other magazines. They actually look like they've done something a little fancier. Most other magazines was very much like Texture, where you would swipe over and then you get basically a PDF scan of the magazine, including ads. So other magazines,
each one is different, or some of them are different.
That's how it was on Texture, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see the New Yorkers put a little more energy into the digital version on here.
Yeah. Didn't they mention either yesterday or sometime that for certain screen combinations like the iPhone, they will actually break, if they have access to the actual text of the PDF, they will break up the PDF and make it more readable for phones. So you don't have to pinch and zoom on this tiny little iPhone SE screen.
Good. I hope they do, because that is a big issue, of course.
Well, let me just show you. I don't know if this is going to look bad on my screen. This on my iPhone is Retro Gamer.
Yeah.
So it's the tiny little.
It's page by page, and tap a page and open it up. Let's see. Do you have to kind of move around within it to read it?
About the.
It's a little bright.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, so you can pinch and zoom.
You have to pinch it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of them are still like that.
Apple, when they demonstrated it, they demonstrated it on iPhone and iPad. But I was surprised when they demonstrated it on the iPad, they did it in portrait mode. But I guess that actually, now that I've used it for a while, makes more sense, because if you're doing it in landscape mode, you get this permanent, well, not permanent, but you get a gutter on here. Whereas if you do it in portrait mode, it just kind of, it's a more natural experience. And the gutter is a floating gutter that goes away when you're reading. Again, this depends on the production of the magazine, because some magazines you can tap the image and zoom, and some magazines there's no zooming at all. So obviously it's still up to the publisher to decide how they want it. You can't zoom the text here on this New Yorker magazine.
When I thought about Apple News Plus yesterday and the magazines, one of the first things that I thought of was I actually stopped reading magazines years ago and get more detailed news through RSS feeds. And I like what Apple News does. You have different sections and there's content from a lot of different publishers. But actually, and I wrote that yesterday, and I get a lot of news and tidbits and things like that from podcasts that I like to listen to. But when I subscribe to Apple News Plus, and you go through that front page, it's actually quite nice because you do get stories from a lot of different publications.
Yes.
So you can read, more in-depth magazine stories from these publications based on a topic, whatever they put in there for you, whether it's sports or cars or.
Be careful though, because for instance, I don't read People magazine, never would, have no interest in the content. But because in demoing this yesterday, I opened an article on People magazine, it is now in my For You section. Elizabeth Hasselbeck tells all about her time on The View. I never watched The View. I don't care. I don't even know who Elizabeth Hasselbeck is, and I certainly don't want to read that article. But it is front and center. It's like the top article in For You, and I only opened People once. So
I think there's a way to block that, though, isn't there?
Well, I think once you open it, you can unheart it. I don't know.
I think actually, I think it's just because you are subscribed to News Plus right now, because I literally didn't open a People magazine.
And you're getting it too?
And I have People front and center, and I have Variety.
Well, I don't mind Variety, but
populated heavily in there too.
Yeah.
And these are both magazines that so far I haven't opened yet. So I think they're just spotlighting
but it's not
information.
So this isn't for you. This is for everybody. Okay. Because it knows I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, though, it's giving me a good selection of Wall Street Journal stuff. NFL football, it must, I've selected these because of, years of use of Apple News. So a lot of this comes from my previous use of Apple News.
Yeah. It would be very
pretty interesting. I subscribed to Apple News this morning, and I just got an alert that your Apple News subscription has expired.
Okay, there's some growing pains.
Yeah. In fact, there's some people who, in addition to the crash, which as far as I know has fixed, it was like a server update that they did. They didn't have to push out a operating system update, but some people have been complaining or commenting on the fact that they haven't been able to get family sharing to update. And I think it's just a matter of just wait. A couple people that downloaded it yesterday at iMore had the same situation where their family sharing devices it just wasn't showing it. And it's supposed to just happen automatically. You literally open your news app, whether you had anything to do with the lead family member subscribing or not, you just open it up and there you have it. And some people, it just wasn't showing up at all. And they would delete the app and reinstall it, restart their devices, do all the normal things that you would do, made sure that they were signed in with the right Apple ID, all that kind of stuff, and it just never worked. And then just suddenly it worked. So I think in some circumstances, just wait. It'll update, hopefully.
And now we're nitpicking, but the sharing feature leaves a little bit to be desired. And I wasn't sure what would happen, but if I share a story from Apple News, if somebody has Apple News, they'll get that story. But if they don't, they'll get a link that promotes Apple News. That's kind of an issue for me because honestly, mostly what I want to do when I'm perusing news is bookmark it for use on our shows. So I can't really use this for that. Jony Ive is leaving Apple. And the hot take from John Gruber, I think, to me, remains the best hot take. His last sentence of his piece is, I don't worry that Apple's in trouble because Jony Ive is leaving. I worry that Apple's in trouble because he's not being replaced.
So John has walked that. I got him on my show, and he got Ben Thompson on his show on Friday, and he has. I think he said his words where he regretted that part of it.
He's walked it back a little bit, and in fact, the Wall Street Journal article that said Jony Ive was leaving because he just didn't get no respect is apparently
That's a very bad, not good article.
It's apparently really irritated Tim Cook. Tim sent a message to Dylan Byers from NBC News saying, "Hi, Dylan, hope you're well." Talking about, I guess Dylan must have asked him about the Wall Street Journal story. "The story is absurd. A lot of the reporting and certainly the conclusions just don't match with reality. At a base level," I always worry about this exact problem with our coverage too. At the base level, it shows a lack of understanding about how the design team works and how Apple works. We who are not inside Apple have a very different view of what's going on inside Apple than those who are there, of course, of necessity. And that's true of every organization. That's just an inherent flaw in reporting. It distorts.
So what I did, Leo.
I'll finish the email, then you can tell me.
Right.
It distorts relationships, decisions, and events to the point that we just don't recognize the company it claims to describe. The design team is phenomenally talented. As Jony has said, they're stronger than ever, and I have complete confidence that they will thrive under Jeff Williams, who's now the COO, now in charge of the design team. Evans Hankey, who is also a design team member and worked closely with Jony Ive, and Alan's leadership. We know the truth. We know the incredible things they're capable of doing. The projects they're working on will blow you away. Like with everything except that last sentence, which is kind of classic Tim Cook marketing speak. I would say this is very credible. This reads right to me, which is that the Journal's reporting wasn't wrong, but that it's hard to understand what it's like inside a company and how the structure is when you're looking from the outside. Go ahead, Rene.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is because I had the exact same thing as you, and I happen to know some people on that team. And as soon as that came out, and I'm sure you can speak to other people who know people at Apple who tell you the same thing, it just didn't jibe with what I'd heard from them over the years. And I asked, and they said, these stories didn't happen, and I'm like sick to my stomach right now, and I don't know how I'm going to spend my weekend. And that's like a horrible position for that. And they can't go on record. They are not allowed to go on record unless Apple PR allows them to, and Apple PR, I don't think will let them do that. So what I did was I talked to Miley Kuo, who was at Apple until a couple of years ago, and she was on the design and prototyping team. And I put live a 30-minute interview with her this morning where she actually describes how those teams work. And why operations is so essential. And I think the key part that both the Journal missed with their flippant exit thing and some of the early analysis missed is that Jeff Williams isn't running operations at Apple anymore. He's been replaced in that role by a new senior vice president. Jeff is now effectively helping run Apple, like the way that Tim Cook used to help Steve run Apple. And Jeff is way more interested in the day-to-day product development process than Tim's time allows him to be. And so you have now a vice president of industrial design who is amazing. And Miley talks about how amazing. She just says that Evans gets stuff done. And Alan Dye has been leading human interface since iOS 7. These are seasoned leaders. Apple doesn't just give away SVP titles. I wouldn't be surprised if one or somebody got that title. But for now, putting them with Jeff Williams makes a lot of sense to anybody who understands how Apple is running design these days. And it gives you two separate heads, which is what people were complaining about for years under Jony.
Yeah, I mean I can't improve upon that, but I'm going to talk anyway because I'm bored. But that was exactly my reaction too. I don't think that my contacts inside the design team are nearly as rich as Rene's, but my immediate reaction was none of what I've seen in this article corresponds to what I understand the situation inside the design team to be. None of what I've seen this jibes with what I've heard about Jony Ive's relationship with the rest of the executive team. And so when I saw this come out, I was really waiting for either they've totally got it wrong or they got it right, which means that over the weekend, we're going to hear from a lot of former members of employees of Apple who are now safely outside of Apple and no longer restricted by NDA or anything, who will almost certainly have had pent up feelings about this, that they wouldn't just simply make a Medium blog post just to air dirty laundry. But hey, if there's a Wall Street Journal article that's finally blowing the lid off this big problem, that's when you see lots of other people suddenly raise their hands and say, yeah, let me tell you a story that I've been holding on to for a few years that really shows the problem that the Wall Street Journal finally, thank God for the Journal, has illustrated. And we're really not seeing that. And knowing about the how passionate people are inside of Apple, I can absolutely believe that there's a lot of heartbreak going on to see this article, particularly because, as Rene said, you can't then go onto Twitter and say, hi, I work for Apple. Hi, I've been working intimately with this team for years. And boy, this is no, you can't, because you would have to go through Apple PR. And given that this was supposed to be sort of a valedictory for one of if you were to come up with a list of 5, let's make it 10 names of Apple employees, including founders, who were critical to Apple being in the position it is today, Jony Ive is definitely on that list of 10 people, and this really should be like a lifetime achievement award sort of thing. Like it should be like David Letterman's last show. This should be, let's just tell stories about how wonderful not only his work but his work with the design team has been. But now it's been sort of tainted by, well, now we have this really big intestinal gaseous emission that's now clouding the room that we have to now ventilate before we can get back to wishing Jony Ive well and talking about how design works at Apple. So I kind of feel bad for people inside of Apple having to deal with it right now. And again, if all the people who have similar stories from experience at Apple have been waiting almost a full week to talk about them, I'll apologize for having jumped to a conclusion. But yeah, I don't think this doesn't seem credible at all.
Lory?
I think that's the problem with the nature of the internet and the immediacy of reporting these stories, that this is a editorial piece or a sort of deep research piece that would have needed a week to get done and to get done right and to get all the right voices in. Because I'm sure there are a lot of people that either do work for or used to work for Apple that have certain sentiments, but this didn't have enough voices outside of one directive. And because of the immediacy of trying to get this out there to the public, because, we're constantly digesting this information like immediately, it lost the opportunity to have deeper voices, even the opportunity to speak with Apple PR to sort of like negate some of these statements and some of the things that were said. So you almost can't blame news organizations, though you can blame news organizations.
No, you can.
for
totally.
doing it wrong.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, like, it's almost not a surprise to me that they got it wrong, because they're trying so hard to do it fast that they're not doing the work to do it right.
You're too young to remember Time magazine. But this is a
I'm not, but thank you.
Well, the old, not the current Time, in my age, in my era, 30 or 40 years ago, this is a style that was created by Time magazine, of the bird's eye view inside the organization style. And you could tell as soon as you read the lead from the Wall Street Journal, as the deadline loomed for the 10th anniversary iPhone, software designers gathered in the penthouse of an exclusive San Francisco club called The Battery. They'd been saying, and it goes on. It's the fly on the wall reporting that's very compelling for readers, because it puts you inside. But it has that flaw no matter what. And I'm sure they had many sources for this, but it has that flaw no matter what, that you really can't be a fly on a wall, that organizations are complex. Understanding them from within requires being within, and nobody on the outside can really get enough information to tell the right story. So I think that's where I would blame the Wall Street Journal, Lory, because they're adopting this fly on the wall style. Whereas I think I would stand by what John Gruber wrote, even if he won't, and what we've said, because we're not trying to think of we're not saying what's going on inside of Apple. We're observing it as Apple customers and Apple users and Apple journalists from the outside. Here's the impact from the outside, and what's been apparent from the outside for many years is that Jony Ive, I don't know how many times he shows up inside Apple Park, but it's been apparent he's kind of been distant from the whole process. You don't see him on stage. Well, you never saw him on stage, but you don't see him in the videos. You don't see him you saw him at the event at WWDC with Tim kind of looking at the computer, but it's not the same involvement as in the Steve Jobs era. Isn't it funny? That story from Jony Ive leaving was from July. It wasn't until just recently, this month, I think, that Jony Ive actually was taken off the masthead at Apple.com. Our next story might be the biggest Apple story of the decade. You remember Apple sued Qualcomm, saying, you charge too much for the chips that we put in our iPhone. Went to Intel, said, quick, develop a modem to replace the Qualcomm modem. Intel went, scrambled, developed a modem. Then Apple settles with Qualcomm. Qualcomm agrees to sell them Qualcomm chips at a good price for the next 5 years. Apple says, sayonara, Intel. Intel says, what? And sells Apple the modem business for, it turns out, was a pittance. And according to 9 to 5 Mac, Intel had to take a fire sale price for their modems. That this wasn't $1 billion, as much as that sounds like wasn't what Intel was hoping for this. I think though there were other people in the bids, right?
They closed bids 2 weeks before this was even a rumor, so that meant that there really wasn't a big bidding war. Otherwise, they would have basically kept Apple's feet to the fire.
They're worth more to Apple than they are to anybody else, clearly.
Yeah, because Intel realized that their only real customer was going to be Apple. Once Apple aced them out, then they realized that our business is in so many different successful areas. We don't need or have the desire to keep bleeding into a brand new industry that's going to require a great deal of compliance. It's going to require a great deal of new marketing, a great deal of new relationships. Why not just sell it? I don't think they took a loss, but they were more interested in making sure that they have this thing that is not terribly valuable on the open market, but is very valuable to Apple, and making the best deal they could. I don't think they're crying over the deal they made.
No, I doubt they are. Does the fact that T-Mobile Sprint merger looks like it's going to go through, and that is all about 5G, Dish is going to become a new fourth cell phone network and start with 5G. They're not even going to bother with building an LTE network. That also must have put some pressure on Apple to get going with its 5G modem, right? I think Apple would have otherwise sat back and said, we can wait a couple of years because there isn't really a lot of pressure to make a 5G phone yet.
I think their plan was originally the 2020 phone. I don't think that's changed. I think that's when they were hoping they would get.
And they always see, that's kind of contrary to the way Apple works, right? Usually Apple's the last to adopt a new technology.
They will be the last by then. I mean, I think every Android manufacturer is going to have rolled it out by spring of next year.
Which is silly because honestly,
that may be Google. We don't know.
There's all sorts of issues with 5G. We were talking on Sunday about battery life, which at this point is terrible with 5G.
Glenn Stern's phone melted.
Literally. There's also the issue of 5G not being available, and if it is available in your neck of the woods, maybe very, very expensive. I don't know if consumers are going to be in 2020 saying, "Oh, I got to have a 5G phone."
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's mostly, I think, the biggest impact is going to be for services and also for broadband companies who want to build up coverage that they would normally have to get pole rights or cable rights for, because it's not just all the problems that Rene's talking about. It's not like 3G or LTE where you can put up one antenna or repurpose an antenna you already have 3G stuff on. You really are going to have to just throw a 5G bomb in the air that does nothing but penetration scatters 5G stations on every single street corner and every single block. They just don't penetrate. They just don't propagate very well. So you're going to need to cover a wide area. You're going to need so many pieces of hardware to make that happen, and you're still delivering features that aren't necessarily going to convince consumers to upgrade their mobile plan. Now, if it's certainly a feature that will get someone interested in saying, well, I will definitely buy this 5G enabled security camera because I will not have to run a special internet cable or special internet service out to this remote location. It can just access a network on its own, or if there's a low latency sort of product that they need to get going on, like a drone project or something that's a little bit more active than what you can get with normal 4G and LTE right now, that's going to work. But the idea of it being like the transition between 3G and 4G, it's just not going to be it. You're not going to be able to get faster. You're not going to necessarily get better TV out of it. You're not going to get better Netflix out of it. And there has yet to be the case of people wanting to stream at a very, very, very high rate to a phone yet. Games might change that, but 5G availability is going to be a problem.
Intel will still be able to make modems for PCs, for other devices, just not for phones.
The other thing to remember, though, is that 5G is it's a huge mess. It is, like Andy was saying, is a way bigger mess than LTE because it's also not really a thing. It's like three different things. Yeah. There's sub 6 gigahertz, which is what's going to be in rural communities and suburbs, which is going to use a lot of existing infrastructure and be just a little bit faster at first, but steadily gain speed. And then Europe has the mid-range sort of version of 5G. Yeah. And then in cities, it has the millimeter wave, which is that bomb, that's a cluster bomb that Andy was talking about. That's going to take, a at least a mini tower on every block, if not on every balcony in a major city, just to provide distribution. And we'll probably see sub 6 gigahertz phones, especially low cost phones, especially in markets like China, that won't require as much. That people have slightly better service much faster. But for the North American market, you're probably going to have to support both. And that was the Ming-Chi Kuo rumor this week, is that Apple's going to go all in with all 3 phones in 2020.
Finally.
For the Pro.
Only the Pro. Okay.
Yeah, the Pro gets the USB-C 18-watt charger, and the 11 gets the usual Lightning.
That's nice, though.
5-watt Lightning charger.
And I noted that you and others on Twitter are still bemoaning the off-center Lightning port.
Yeah, I mean they basically
who cares? Who are these people that care about that?
Industrial design geeks, Leo. We care about everything, every hole, every notch, every bit of construction.
I guess so.
Rene, would you and your like be made more happy if, let's say, that we sold like a special sort of case where the phone is offset inside the case to make it look like you've got the.
I'm sorry, Andrew. That's a kludge. I don't want a kludge.
No, but it's also a little bit. of because people like Apple people were always making fun of Samsung for never being able to align their ports like at all. They have different ports. Like someone took them and threw them on the phone at some point, and now they can't even do it. It's like, it's just a little bit of Schadenfreude there.
Yeah, well, that's why like maybe we shouldn't have been making fun of Samsung for doing that. It's like, I mean, it's nice. It's details do matter. And you're always correct whenever you say this is how this thing makes me feel. But there's a difference between the thing that makes me roll my eyes is when it goes from, oh, well, gosh, it does look a little bit weird with an offset like that, to fail, loser. This is why Samsung just doesn't get it. It's like, dude, there's an ASIC that had to go there.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of like okay with moving it.
But if you just planned the ASIC last fall, like I told you to.
I bet during the iFix teardown, they didn't even paint the inside of the case as well as they painted the outside.
Oh, shocking. Shocking.
Can never use it again, Andy. Thank you.
Speakers, better.
Yeah. So there's two things that they can do. One is if you have Dolby 5.1, Apple has their own custom virtualizer that will do spatial placement for the sound.
Oh, come on. It's just a small little speaker in the bottom of the phone. You can't tell me.
You say that, but then I was watching. Yeah. So, and I'm the kind of person who's been using my cell phone speaker forever. Like I used to listen to MacBreak Weekly on the speaker of my Trio 680.
We do not encourage that.
I don't encourage putting it to your ear when you're in a cafe and yelling at a person on FaceTime on your ear. Mm-hmm. But like if you're on your own, like the privacy of your own home, you can listen on a speaker if you want to. But this will place it. So like I was watching Godzilla and I was watching Bumblebee, and you hear like moving around, and if it has Dolby Atmos encoding, it'll just use the Atmos encoding and just make a sound state. And the thing that's really cool about this is Apple built this world-class audio lab. And I remember they took us there for the HomePod, and I was in the analyst track for that. So I was with a bunch of like all the analysts that basically, and they're like, we've never been in one this big. This is like 5 times the size of any quiet room we've ever been in. And this is like, we can see down 8 floors. Wow. And they were like super impressed. But I think Apple's doing things in there like the AirPods, like the HomePod, like they're now doing this virtual thing where it tries to detect where the earpiece is on your ear and project the sound in the right direction for you. And all of that is paying off now across like every product they're making. And that's when you have this many billions of dollars and you can make a building like that, you start to earn dividends from it.
Rene, though they're not promoting it like this, would you say the new spatial speakers are more like true stereo? Like there's left and right channels, or at least like maybe a computational version of left and right channels?
Yeah, it's like a soundstage. It's like but the previous ones had wide stereo, which was very much like that. You'd hear like the right and the left. And here it's like it's all the way right. It's halfway right. It's a quarter of the way right. It's center. It's a quarter left, half left, full left.
That's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
I have to say, and we're going to talk about Apple Arcade in a little bit, but the games on Apple Arcade all have really spectacular sound. And playing them on the iPad Pro, you really notice that Apple's put a lot of detail, a lot of attention to audio playback.
And the developers are so proud. We had a chance to chat with them too, and they're like, we want to make the Mac version amazing and the Apple TV version amazing, because usually we don't have time or money to bother with those versions.
Nice. Well, we'll get to that in a little bit. I want to take advantage of the fact that you didn't get a phone, right, Lory?
I did not.
Okay.
I've ordered one, but
yeah. I don't mean to focus on Rene, but he's the one who has the phone.
He's the one who's holding them in his hand.
If we lived closer, we would be
showing
sharing.
them off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I presume you didn't get a Series 5 watch yet. You still just have the phone, or do you have a watch too?
I'm not wearing
me
anything
or Rene?
today.
I do not.
Okay. And Rene's not wearing it today.
I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, but
okay. Got it.
Okay,
The embargo's not
Rene,
off. I understand.
Rene,
That's fine.
I'm having a laugh at your expense, but I am also the person who snuck like a pre-release phone into the studio.
I remember that.
Hidden inside a case for an older phone. So we are just.
I learned
just
from watching
enjoying
Andy on
Andy's
MacBreak.
very good.
People would ask him, and he would be like, "What is that
Andy's
over there? Is that a
very
bird?"
Yeah.
Andy is my sensei, my Yoda.
I don't want to belabor it. I did order.
But I can tell you, I did get to look at them
Oh,
in
yeah?
person. If you have some questions on what that titanium looks like.
I ordered the titanium. I think I'm nuts. I ordered the
me too.
dark titanium with the link band. I hope that was a good idea.
Nice.
It was a lot of money,
I-
so it better be a good idea.
The titanium is absolutely gorgeous. I love this color. In terms of the difference in brushed metal, it's definitely the winner in my opinion over aluminum. And then when you're getting into that comparison between the polished metal of stainless steel versus the brushed metal of titanium, it's a little more complicated as to what you like better, but I absolutely love the way that titanium looks. It's deep and rich, so it really feels like real jewelry when you look at it. It's gorgeous, and I think I prefer. I don't prefer the black case, but in terms of between the two titanium colors, I prefer the black just because it has this nice shine to it, even though it's brushed. So it's really, really gorgeous. You're gonna love it.
I got the right one, thank God.
I got the same one.
Did you get that too?
I ordered it. Yep.
A little pricey, but I thought, well, in fact, last year I ordered just the cheapest one I could get. But I thought, I kind of I've had titanium watches.
I always say that. I'm like, I'm never going to buy more than the aluminum again. And then every year it's like, we have a new material for you.
I know. So I got the black titanium with the space black link. Do you think that's a good choice? That's what you got, Rene?
Yeah, except I didn't get it with the space black link because I already had that. My first Apple Watch was the black steel that came with that.
Right.
So I got it with one of the new two-tone bands, which I really like.
This will be my first link because I've always resisted it because it's like ridiculously expensive. It's hundreds of dollars for a watch.
The funny thing about it, though, is like other watchmakers had those for 100 years and never thought to make them easy. And now they all do it. Like Apple makes it once, and now the entire world of
easy
link
to
bracelets
take
is
or add a
everyone.
link so that it fits just right.
Yeah.
This doesn't have a magnet in it, though, because I noticed that they said if you want the compass to work on the watch, don't use a magnetic wrist bracelet. There's no magnet in the link, or is there?
No,
Good.
there's not.
Not that I need a compass, but
you say that.
Oh, but let's talk about the compass. I'm very excited.
Why? Are you an orienteer? Do you get lost on stage?
I get lost in the woods, actually.
Do you?
It's
all right.
fantastic to me that they've been able to fit an actual magnetometer. I cannot say that.
Magnetometer.
I apologize for that.
You said it.
It's named after the X-Man Magneto.
Magneto.
Okay, yes. Into that tiny little Apple Watch, and it's not digital, or it's not based on
That's
GPS
what surprised
tracking.
me.
You
It's
don't
not
have to be on
GPS.
Wi-Fi.
It's a compass. It's literally a magnetic compass.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's right there on your wrist.
It's crazy.
It's really impressive.
well,
So
okay,
Lory shamed me about this because I didn't think it was a big deal. And then she said it was a really big deal. So I started asking around. And the first thing people told me was, you're out with your family, but you've gotten separated. And you just say, find my wife, find my kid. And then without even touching your phone, it shows you exactly which direction to go as well. And
that also brings up this U1 chip, which Apple mentioned briefly. Did they brief you on ultra wideband? Did they talk about that at all?
They did not very much because the first feature using it, which is going to be a spatial airdrop, is not shipping until 13.1. So they just said this is what it does and this is what's coming.
Right. I still love my iPhone 11 Pro Max. I think it's really the best iPhone I've ever had. This time Apple really told the truth. It's also the most expensive iPhone of all time, but that's another matter for another day. After this, we talked about another big announcement. I think maybe kind of the sleeper announcement of the year for Apple Arcade. Let's see. There's arcade. How do you guys like arcade?
Loving
Haven't
it.
used it.
Oh, Jim, you got to get out of that music shell you're in.
No, I'm just not a gamer.
Yeah.
I understand why people use arcade, and I understand that it's going to be very popular, but it's just not something that I use. I just don't play games. So,
Actually, Jim, can I say something? That I'm not a gamer either, and of course, I signed up for it as soon as I activated the iPhone 11 and been downloading so many of these cool games. They're not really the games that I've been finding they're more like puzzles. They're more like interactive pieces. A lot of them are like interactive pieces of art. They're not the sort of games that get me all like wound up and anxious and nervous.
Yeah.
They're like calm and they're tranquil. So I like them a lot.
That just sounds frustrating to me.
I don't know that I would have signed up if I didn't. I mean, I guess I would have anyway, but I signed up because I knew it would actually save us money having a 17-year-old son.
Absolutely.
Right? But
is he happy, though? That's a good question. Because he's presumably a hardcore gamer, right, at that age?
He plays a lot of games, yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, he's happy. In fact, he was showing me while we were having lunch. He doesn't seem to go to school a whole lot. I don't know. He's worked out a nice little schedule for himself. But anyway, we were having lunch together today, and he's like, "Have you seen Hot Lava? This game's amazing.
So fun.
It's so fun." Yeah. And I was like, "Oh yeah, look at this."
This is Operator 41. You have to sneak around and get to the phone before the Gestapo guy gets you, and it's kind of, I'll tell you what I love about these games. They're games that probably wouldn't kind of make it on the App Store without, because they're just, some of them are really more arty or they're simpler.
Ads,
Yeah. But I think this is just really, oh God, get in there. Oh yes, I did. I got there. I snuck around him.
It's like Castle Wolfenstein on rails. That's awesome.
But there's no shooting. And this is, kind of pretty typical of Apple's stuff, is that they don't like to do, shoot 'em ups. There's some fighting, but this is it's just creative. They're very creative. And $5 a month, and it seems like an unlimited supply of entertainment. I worry about the game. I worry about what's going to do to the game ecosystem outside the arcade.
Yeah. Yeah, how many games need to move into arcade as arcade sort of moves along, right? That's the real question, is what does it look like a year from now? And does the exclusivity remain? And if it does, can people migrate into it in order to take advantage and participate there? Like, I got a lot of questions.
I would not want to be launching a big title on the App Store, especially a freemium title right now on the App Store with in-app purchases, because I feel like people are going to go, I'll do the one I got. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, but particularly, I hope that I get to like actually pay for and keep a game like What the Golf.
Oh, because isn't What the Golf awesome?
Yeah, it's almost like a stand-up routine that you're just in the audience of, because it's not. I mean, it starts you off thinking that, okay, look, it's a cute little cartoony like mini golf game, but then like you take a swing, and on the second or third hole you take a swing and you've actually just like thrown the player, and now like every time you swing you're throwing the player onto the green, and now it's just level after level after level, and I would like to be able to own the games I really, really like and have access to play them and replay them whenever I want. I would be disappointed if someday it left Apple Arcade and the developers didn't find a way to put it back in the App Store or whatever. Because it's the same problem you have like with Netflix and other streaming services, where you hate to think that, okay, well I can only watch Friends or Seinfeld until Netflix or whoever or Hulu loses the rights to it, and then maybe if I sign up for this other, you like to own things. I would also like the pleasure of taking $5 out of my wallet and giving it to the people who wrote this app.
Well, you're right. I'm gonna cry.
Here's some money. I want you to have some money. I want the next time that you buy a muffin at Starbucks, I want you to maybe think that it was the $18 that I gave you. 4 of those singles were paid for that muffin.
I'm going to cry if they take this away. You're right. I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
You know, this is this game is hours of fun. And if they suddenly said, "Oh yeah, it's no more," but you know what? Maybe that's actually, now that you mention it, that's going to be the secret of this. Is, oh, you want to keep playing it? Well, just pay us $5 and you can keep playing it. Maybe that's why these guys are putting up with that.
Yeah,
that's an.
I'm sure these guys. I'm sure. Go ahead.
That's the nature of the streaming world or the subscribing world that we live in, right? Things leave Netflix and it's like, oh crap! Like, maybe that is a reality. I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting to see.
Maybe the thought of this whole thing is that when games do leave the arcade because they bring in new games,
then you'll buy
people will be allowed to sell them.
Yeah, I think that's probably it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to be bummed because in a couple of months I'm going to have to buy this. But that is a good incentive for the developer, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wonder if Apple allows that. Like what kind of long-term deal? Because if everybody's like, well, cool, I'll use Apple Arcade to get people hooked, and then a month in, I'll bail, and now you got to pay me $20. I don't think Apple.
No,
wants that.
I don't think that you can bail. I think it's going to be a situation of where maybe Apple, they keep adding games, so at some point they're going to have to trim. If they trim, then your game is gone. But let's not forget that Apple is helping to fund these games too.
Yeah.
Right.
So it could be that you're being paid for, the development and everything by Apple, and then if they want to shelve it, it's theirs to shelve.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
But at least it's not. It's only exclusive to iPhone in regards to mobile platforms. So there's nothing preventing them from making a version for Windows or for consoles or for the Switch. So at least there's that.
Right. Yep.
This is now on the Apple TV. Today's the day you can update your Apple TV and go out and get. I don't know what I'm doing here. Apparently building something. I don't know.
Definitely not podcasting.
That podcasting. Yes, I remember that. That's so 1995. Our show today, I got a good idea for you. If you deliver content to customers, whether it's podcasts like ours or apps, our sponsor, Cachefly, is actually more than a sponsor. From day one, practically, we've used Cachefly. I was really struggling with how to get these shows out in a timely fashion. You may remember how hard it was to download them. I was begging people to seed them on BitTorrent. We were trying all sorts of things. Matt Levine of Cachefly came along, and this is probably 2008, 2007, very early on, and said, let us help. Cachefly is a content delivery network. This is what they do. A CDN is, by its very nature, a faster, better way to deliver content. Cachefly CDN is up to 10 times faster than traditional delivery methods. And because they have servers all over the world, and when you download it, you download from a server that's near you, not only is it faster, it's more reliable. They can offer a 100% service level agreement, SLA, 100%. 100%. It's also about 30% faster than other major CDNs. Cachefly is awesome. They literally are the reason we can deliver petabytes of data to you every single month, thanks to Cachefly. The other thing I love about Cachefly, they will bill you on a yearly usage basis, not on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour, or even week-by-week. One of the problems we have, and I bet you do too, anybody who has apps or podcasts or content or anything that they deliver to their end users over the internet, it tends to be spiky, right? Nothing will happen, then boom, everything all at once. And the problem with some CDNs is suddenly you have to start, am I going to exceed my limit this week or today? Is this going to be a problem? Is my spike going to kill me? Is my bill going to double? Not with Cachefly. Cachefly averages out your costs over a year of usage so that you know exactly what you're going to pay month to month. You don't have to constantly check your bill, make sure you're all right. So we're very spiky. When a show comes out, everybody downloads it and then it tapers off. Cachefly has handled that. We literally deliver petabytes of data every month. I haven't checked last time. I think it was 7 or 8 petabytes every month through the Cachefly network with not one hitch in over 10 years. Join thousands of people who trust Cachefly's reliable network. It's not just me. LG uses it. Even Microsoft uses it. Adobe uses it. Ars Technica. No billing spikes. You'll save on average more than 20% for the best possible service. I don't know where you can go wrong. In fact, why aren't you using Cachefly? I got a deal for you. If you go to twit.cachefly.com right now, bring your bill, and they will analyze it. They'll look at the spikes. They'll average it out over a year. So bring them as many bills as you can, and they can give you a quote. And really, you'll get the best sense of what you will save using the best CDN out there. Cachefly. Twit.cachefly.com. No high pressure. Don't worry. They're great guys. Matt Levine and his team are fantastic. Twit.cachefly.com. They deliver Twit. They should be delivering you. Thank you, Cachefly. So Deep Fusion's coming out, and that changes everything, or what? It's in the developer beta now. Nilay Patel calls it sweater mode because all of Apple's demos with the with the Deep Fusion
I can see why they would do that, though, because the sweater, you can zoom in to see the knit of the sweater. So I can see why they're doing that. They're using like a very textured.
Okay. So what does Deep Fusion do that's new, Lory? Look at your article. Or are you still writing it?
Well, we didn't do a whole lot about Deep Fusion because it wasn't out yet. Right. So nobody has written anything about Deep Fusion yet, but don't worry, it's coming.
Okay.
It enhances it and sort of like makes it like a little bit brighter and deeper. It's almost like having and this is silly to go this far, but it's sort of like having a film camera. You really get it captures the detail in a much better way, in a much deeper way, so that you kind of get like a brighter, clearer picture going. So if you can remember, your old film photographs, if you were to put them into your computer and like zoom and zoom and zoom, you get really deep and get really detailed way in the background. You can do that. Not quite like that, but you can really get that kind of extra detail with the Deep Fusion going.
Here's from The Verge's article. The iPhone 11 Pro cameras will now have 3 new modes of operation that will automatically kick in based on light levels and the lens you're using. The standard wide-angle lens. Standard wide-angle lens is not ultra-wide. It's what I'd call the normal lens, the middle lens, right? Yeah. We'll use Apple's enhanced Smart HDR for bright to medium lit scenes. Deep Fusion will kick in for medium to low light, and then it's night mode for dark scenes. The telelens will use mostly Deep Fusion with Smart HDR taking over for very bright scenes, night mode for very dark scenes. The ultra-wide does not support either Deep Fusion or night mode. It always uses Smart HDR. Yeah. That's confusing. But the whole point is Apple doesn't want you to even know this, right? They don't even want you to think about it.
I was gonna say exactly that. Something that confused me was, okay, when is it taking a regular picture? When is it using Smart HDR? And when is it using Deep Fusion? I know that it's giving me a visual reminder whenever I'm using night mode, where they could have just simply said, and we've used a lot of new technologies to make sure that no matter what the situation, it will take the best picture possible. When they're talking about, okay, now it's using Deep Fusion, now it's using Smart HDR, now it's not even doing
nerds.
HDR at all.
We want to know what the hell's going on.
Google would just put it in a blog post. Like Google would just say, we use HDR Plus for older pixels and we use Super Zoom for newer pixels, and here's all the nerdy details, and it's in a blog post only nerds will find.
And hide it, yeah.
It's also a little confusing because supposedly night mode only uses the ultra wide,
the super wide. Yeah.
Yes. No, it only uses the regular wide angle.
Well, it says though it will use night mode for standard and tele if the scenes are very dark.
Yeah, I believe it'll crop in. It'll like simulate like the way it does for some of the other shots. When there's not enough light, it'll simulate the telephoto because you have enough data. You can't simulate ultra wide the ultra wide has. The main shooter, the wide angle, has 100% focus pixels, really good OIS. It's like the best 12 megapixel camera you can get, and it does all the heavy lifting. The telephoto has some focus pixels and OIS, but it's because of the aperture, it's not as good at low light. So sometimes it'll switch to the main camera and just machine learn it to make it look like the telephoto. The ultra wide angle has no focus pixels and no OIS, but it can get wider shots. But you can't simulate that with the wide angle because you don't have the ultra wide data to work off of.
Right. So this is what Apple told Nilay. There's no indicator in the camera app that Deep Fusion is on. It's invisible to the user. There's no indicator in the photo roll. It doesn't show up in the EXIF data. Apple says that's very much intentional. It doesn't want you to think about how to get the best photo. The idea is the camera will just sort it out for you. By the time, it's different than Smart HDR. I guess that's important. By the time you press the shutter button, the camera's already got 3 frames. They talked about this on stage. At a fast shutter speed, that's to freeze motion. Press the shutter, it takes 3 more shots. And then 1 long exposure shot, overexposed probably, to capture detail. The 3 regular shots and the long exposure shot are merged together into what they call a synthetic long. Then Deep Fusion picks the short exposure image with the most detail. It has 3, remember. Merges it with the synthetic long exposure, but it only merges those 2 frames. The 2 images are also processed for noise differently than Smart HDR in a way that's better for Deep Fusion. Then, that's not all.
Yeah.
The images are run through 4 detail processing steps. This is all, by the way, in the blink of an eye, while basically while you're looking at the picture. Pixel by pixel, each tailored to an increasing amount of detail. So this is where the machine learning comes in. The skies and the walls, lowest band, skin, hair, fabrics, the highest, or sweaters, the highest band. And then this creates a series of weightings for how the 2 images are blended, taking detail from one and tone, color, and luminance from the other, then generating the final image. I presume, Rene, that you already have this. You're on developer beta, yes?
Yeah, although it hasn't shown up for me yet. But Matthew Panzarino also has a really good write-up on TechCrunch where he gets into a lot of the details about how the 2 images are generated and merged. But it's really smart. Like it takes those 2 final images and generates a double size, I think 24 megapixel final image out of it. And it's a little bit like, I know some people really want to be able to manually control night mode and they can't, or they want to manually control Deep Fusion and they can't. He has a good workaround though. If you turn on what we were just talking about, that magic crop, it turns off Deep Fusion because it's forcing the ultra wide to shoot, and Deep Fusion can't use the ultra wide. So right now, because of that technical limitation, you have to choose between having the extra crop data or having Deep Fusion. But you can play one off the other.
I have to say, in the sample images that Apple's provided, here's another guy in a sweater. It's amazing. I mean, because if
you can see an eyelash on one of the sweaters. It is really astounding.
Yeah, the detail's really good. And yet where you don't care about detail, it's fine. Neil says it takes about a second longer for the image to be processed, but that's a second is 1001.
You can't beat it. Like when I was trying it at the event, by the time you hit the gallery button, it's pretty much done. So like you'd have to be a super fast interface person to even see the end bit of it, I think.
Yeah. And that's really something that Apple needs to be praised for, in addition to the quality of the images. That one of the frustrating, I think that my Pixel camera takes really good pictures, but the number of times where it just takes a while to process something, the number of times where I can't get the next picture in as fast as I want to take it, is just frustrating. The biggest fail of any camera, no matter who's designing it, no matter whether it's a phone or whether it's a traditional camera, is you press the button to take a picture and it does not take a picture, no matter what the excuse is. Whereas every single iPhone I've ever used from the very, very beginning, when you press that white button, it will take some kind of a picture. That will never be anything less than good. And that's what a phone camera is supposed to be able to do. It's not necessarily all the extras that you can get in an app like Halide Camera and everything you can do within the regular camera app to adjust exposure, change focus points, use different modes. Those are all great. But the whole purpose of a phone camera is here is a big white button. And when you push this, you will get a picture that is not less than very good. Because that's what people use phone cameras for. I mean, people like me who are nerds for photography, I love editing it on the device. I love putting it on my MacBook and then seeing what all kinds of monkeying around with Photoshop can do. But people want a good snapshot of this place where they went to, or their friends at this bar, or their parents seeing their grandkid for the first time. They don't necessarily care that, oh, well, the shadow detail isn't very, very good, or there's a blown highlight right here. They want to make sure if they press this white button, all they got to do is press the button, they'll get a really, really good picture. they don't want to have to like shake the camera to figure out why is it kind of locked up right now, and why is the white button gray for the next 2 or 3 seconds, which is what you get sometimes with Android cameras. So I don't want that to be lost in the shuffle with all this technical stuff about what it's doing with machine learning and processing. The fact is, push a white button, get a really good picture. That's always been the thing that is almost exclusively a feature of the iPhone.
Fun to know. Yeah. Panzerino points out that while this is actually a really good tip. Make a note of this when you get Deep Fusion. There's currently no way to turn off the Deep Fusion process, but because the overcrop feature of the new cameras uses the ultra-wide, a small hack to see the difference between Deep Fusion and not Deep Fusion is to turn on overcrop, which will disable Deep Fusion as it does not use the ultra-wide lens. Rene, would you explain what he just said to me? I don't understand. What is that?
So there's a hardware limitation where, because there's no optical image stabilization and no focus pixels on the ultra-wide, it's not used for a lot of the fancy stuff. It really is just a regular camera. It's not used for night mode. It's not used for any of those things. So when that is enabled, it can't do a lot of the extra things. But when you turn that off, it's going to, so I'm not explaining this very well. Deep Fusion can't have the ultra-wide camera on at the same time, and the extra area data can't be used when Deep Fusion is on. So you can pick between the two, and whichever one you pick is on, the other one turns off.
And remind me again, how do we turn on the extra area data? Is that live?
That was what we did before when you went to the camera app and you said capture outside of...
Capture. So if you turn that off, you'll have to turn that off to get any Deep Fusion.
Yes,
images.
Correct. And if you turn it on, it turns off.
So that's why Apple leaves that off by default. So I'm going to go back into my camera.
They said no. They said that wasn't. There was like other technical reasons, which I understand is privacy based.
Yeah. You said that too.
It'd be better for people to have it off.
When do we get Deep Fusion? If it's in beta, developer beta now, it's still a little ways off, right?
Yeah, usually a couple for the point releases were pretty fast though. I mean, 3.1.1 came out
at the torrid rate of point releases. Who knows?
Yeah,
they are paddling well.
Not every story was cheerful and positive, of course. Apple has gotten a lot of heat from us and many others for how they've worked with China and Russia and other countries. In particular, the back and forth over the Hong Kong protest app. Last time we spoke, Apple had restored the app, hkmap.live, that showed police presence in Hong Kong. They have now removed it again, and I think finally removed it. Tim Cook sent a memo to internally to Apple employees saying that the company had removed the app after receiving, quote, credible information from the authorities, i.e., the Hong Kong police, and people in Hong Kong, that the app was being used maliciously to target individual officers for violence and to victimize individuals and property where no police are present. As a result, Cook said the app violated Apple rules and local laws, and so we have to pull it down. John Gruber was a little critical of that memo, as was Maciej Ceglowski. Maciej is the creator of Pinboard. His blog, idlewords.com, has in the last few months been recording what's been going on in Hong Kong because he's on the ground. And following the protests, Maciej says the first application that the app was being used maliciously makes no sense at all. The app does not show the locations of individual officers at all. It shows general concentrations of police units with a significant lag. The app is aggregating reports from Telegram, Facebook, and other sources. It beggars belief, Maciej writes, that a campaign to target individual officers would use a world-readable crowdsourcing format like this. Can Mr. Cook point to a single example of that? Can anyone? So he says it not only goes against the evidence, it goes against the documentary record of 18 weeks of protests and not even possible given the technical constraints of the app. He also says the second allegation that the app victimizes individuals and property where no police are present. He says, does Mr. Cook have any evidence for this claim? The app does not show an absence of police. It shows concentrations of police. So Gruber concludes, I can't recall an Apple memo or statement that crumbles so quickly under scrutiny. For a company that usually measures umpteen times before cutting anything, it's both sad and startling. thoughts?
Yep. No, I think I said something very similar. You usually see like Steve Jobs' thoughts on Flash, and you think that so much time and effort went into this. And Apple's not been known for crisis PR. They've been known for very methodical, very thought out, almost bulletproof PR, where you can disagree with it, but you can't just quickly say how it has no foundation or substance. And this just came off as really fast and really fragile and very different than I think we've ever seen comms from Apple before.
And remember, it wasn't public comms. It was intended for the Apple employees, but that doesn't excuse it.
Those always come out. Those No, I think that those always come out.
Yeah.
It's a way of issuing a press release without issuing a press release. And what really marked it as kind of gutless for me is that they didn't take a stand as we think it's the right thing to do at this time, given the situation in Hong Kong. It was we have our hands are tied. It violates local law, and we always say that we have to obey local law, and it violates app developer guidelines, and we always say that things have to. We have no opinion one way or another. It could be any country if anyone. It's like, oh, for heaven's sake. It's like, just take a stand. Even if it's a stand that you think you're going to get jumped on for, don't just say our hands are tied. It violates local laws. Again, debatable. It violates app guidelines. Well, again, look, are you going to take down the Waze app because it shows people where police are staked out on highways so they can avoid speed traps and drunk checkpoints? It's just gutless.
Lory?
That's exactly, Andy. The point I was going to make was just that when Apple originally pulled it, the developer said, this is not an app to help you, avoid the police. This is not an app to help you find the police. This just shows some things. What you do with this information is out of our hands. So Apple let it back into the App Store under that idea, and then pulled it again because they have evidence that it's being used to hurt people. Well, I have evidence that Tinder is used to rape people, so that doesn't mean anything. That like just because somebody is using it inappropriately from its original intent doesn't mean that it should be removed from the App Store, because then under that circumstance you'd have to pull a lot of things. Like you'd have to pull Waze for showing where there's drunk DUI checkpoints. Like it's the app itself is not committing an illegal act. It's what people are doing with it, which is out of the hand of the developer. And under their circumstances, Apple should have fought against the Chinese government's opinion that it's illegal, which I don't think it is.
Well, let's also reflect on the fact that when they approved the app, the Chinese Communist Party newspaper had this editorial that was, I think, I can't remember the headline off the top of my head, but it was along the lines of "Is Apple out of their minds?" And the text of the editorial was like, "I can't believe they're aligning themselves with hooligans and criminals, and we should question their motives, and we should, and it's an unbelievable step for them to take, given that there will almost certainly be consequences for Apple in the future based on this." And I believe that this editorial, with appropriate translation, landed on the desks of people in Cupertino, and that might have influenced their decision.
It was aimed. It was aimed at them.
Yeah.
It was. Exactly. Read this. This is what the Chinese government. This is what President Xi says. Now, what are you going to do?
It is startling how EU regulation cannot affect change as much as a single sigh in a Chinese government application.
And, I don't want to relitigate it, because we spent a long time on last Wednesday on This Week in Google, and again on Sunday on Twit, talking about this. And I don't, I want to sit on the fence on this one. On the one hand, I feel like if you're an American company, you should stand up for freedom of speech, liberty, and if you're in a country that is authoritarian and trying to sell products there, maybe you should rethink your stance there. On the other hand, Apple has a responsibility to its shareholders, if not its stakeholders, to its shareholders to make a lot of money. And there's no bigger market than the Chinese market, and they're making a lot of money there. And so, they're not going to pull out of China, and that's really the choice, is pull out of China or follow the laws in China. It's a tough place to be. Yeah. I'd like to see more spine from Apple, but it's not me. It's not my choice to make. It's their choice to make.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing is, I keep saying this. I don't know where the line is that Apple is not willing to cross when it comes to China. I wish I could say that I knew that there's a line which they would say, no, we will absolutely not acquiesce to this. The fact that. The fact that even the idea of complying with local laws in the United States of America, how many horrendous injustices in the past 100 years have been committed that was absolutely in line, has actually been underscored and promoted by actual laws that helped these injustices to happen. At some point, they have to say it's not enough that an app simply abides by our developer guidelines. It's not enough to say that it's legal. It does things that are legal in this country. At some point, Apple has to say either you have to say, here is lines we do not cross. Here's why we're making these decisions, or they have to stop pretending that they are actually for justice, that they are actually for freedom, that they are actually for privacy, because otherwise they have to really defend themselves against the argument that they are for these things when the optics are good and when it suits them.
We're running a little late. We'll get to... Sorry, I'm talking to somebody in the studio, not you. I'm just telling folks in the studio that we're getting to security now in about half an hour, running a little
okay.
And that's because we started MacBreak Weekly a little late because Leo it goes on and on. And it's all my fault.
One thing just worth pointing out is that Tim Cook gets into a lot of trouble because he believes in engagement. And I said last week, it's sometimes engagement becomes appeasement, and you have to be very careful.
Yeah, there's a fine
line.
Editorials
slamming him for working with the Trump administration. Their editorials slamming him for working with some of the governments that extract rare earth materials in Latin America and Africa. And he is very consistent in this. But to Andy's point, there has to be a line, because there are things, and it's not an Apple question, it's a tech question, because we see all sorts of stuff from all sorts of companies.
It's a question for American companies in general.
Yeah. American companies broke my heart last week in many, many ways, and it's not gonna. And they've been doing it for weeks. Like there's always, like, there was a story with, can you still use Emacs? Can you still use Android? Like at what point do you have your own sense of ethics and your sense of products?
Emacs is a great example. Richard Stallman.
Android is too now.
Richard
with
Stallman
all the
wrote
Andy Rubin
it.
stuff.
Andy Rubin created Android. Honestly, we're increasingly surrounded by authoritarian countries. Are you just going to stop selling to everybody?
People are angry with Microsoft for having ICE deals, but also for like being pro-environment, but selling to a lot of anti-environment.
And yet the only tool consumers have, the only tool even journalists like us have, is not buying the products. And for us to call them out. I don't think Tim Cook and Apple would be getting as much heat on this if they didn't constantly say how they stand up for privacy, freedom,
civil liberties,
civil liberties, environmental causes.
Robert Kennedy.
Yeah, if they didn't say that over and over again, I don't know. I mean, nobody's yelling at Ford Motor Company. Nobody's. I mean, it's just.
I mean, Disney opened Disney Shanghai, right?
Right.
And but it.
Right. So, I don't know what the answer is.
It's there. This kind of opens up like a larger global discussion. I've mentioned this before. Really, there isn't a lot that you can argue against adhering to regulations in a different country. Like I think I had mentioned, like that becomes ethnocentric when we start trying to impose our beliefs on them. Though there, in some circumstances, I do think that we should try to impose our beliefs. But to me, the more frightening thing, the thing that's bigger and deserves more conversation, is how right now, using this example, the Chinese government is influencing how we censor our own people here in the United States by banning people from, Twitch, firing them for being a part of the interview, by fining NBA players for speaking out. Like this is censoring people in the U.S. because of influence from an outside country. That to me is much bigger than we're pulling an app from the Chinese App Store. That's their own country. That's their own thing. It is big, but bigger is that we're allowing another country to censor us because of finance, because of money.
And it's going to happen more and more and more and more, by the way.
Yeah. That's very frightening to me.
It sounded from everybody's reports that this was the MacBook Pro we've been waiting for, that they fixed the keyboard, they fixed the thermals, so the i9 in this is giving you its full juice. New speaker system, which is supposedly really good. Rene, you love it, I think.
Yeah, I've been using it for about a week now, and it's like I'll get out of the way up front. I think the webcam isn't a front to the machine. It's still 720p.
720. What's the deal?
And it does nothing. It does nothing for like if this camera was 1080p or 4K, I could use it for mobile video production because the microphone, while not outstanding, is really USB. Like it's like
pretty
a
good
mid-range USB.
Yeah,
mic.
people have compared it to a Yeti or something like that. It's certainly good enough.
And there's
you
no
could
Wi-Fi 6.
You could do a podcast.
So those are the two dings.
And it's not Wi-Fi 6, which is weird because even the iPhone 11 is Wi-Fi 6, the new 802.11ax.
One thing Apple does, so we have something to complain about. It's that one thing every time.
You know, it probably has more to do with chipsets than anything else, right?
Yes.
So
but everything else is my wish list. They did everything I wanted them to do.
It really is the System 7 of MacBooks. It's because the logo is it sucks less.
Now I got the darker one of the two. Or did I? Yeah, that's slate. It's not quite as dark as I expected. It's almost aluminum, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's the darker one.
It is, but
the other one is real silver though.
It's real pretty. I think it's very nice. Is the hinge changed as well? I think it is.
It's just a little taller because the thing is a little deeper.
Yeah.
But you get space gray stickers, Leo. That's the important thing.
What? Oh, well, that's worth it. That's worth every penny. And it's already booting.
Key.
Yeah, look at that key. For me, the separate escape key is also important because I use Emacs, so I actually use an escape key. So that's pretty cool.
Apple shouted out Vim during the demo,
or Vim or VI. Absolutely, yeah. Escape key is really important in VI. Also, they've separated out the fingerprint reader, so it's just kind of a separate button from the touch bar. The keys, capses, I don't have to recapitulate. Everybody knows all of this. Oh, it's talking to me. Hey, hi Siri.
Yeah, you haven't clicked the button fast enough.
Hi Siri. Yeah. It talks
faster. You can enjoy
faster
those new arrow keys that are just like old arrow keys and the way they should be.
That's all anybody wanted was a 2015 MacBook with the new Intel processors, right?
That's it.
Yeah. It's really all they had to do was say, let's take all the bad ideas we put in 3 years ago and not actively make it stink now. We don't have to innovate. We don't have to even iterate. We don't have to have courage. We just have to say, let's take a look at the design that has worked for every computer used by a human who types with fingers and emulate that instead of anticipating humans having different sorts of hands in the next 1,000 years. So, yeah, the inverted T is a big I was kind of surprised by how welcoming the new keyboard was, simply by virtue of the fact that it doesn't seem like it's off balance, and there was something about the touch bar that really just rendered everything like it's tilted to the left a little bit. Having the escape key that's anchoring the upper left-hand corner, and as visual creatures, we start at the top left of things and work our way down and right. So when the first thing you see on a keyboard isn't there, that's discombobulating. Again, going back to a standard inverted T configuration of the arrow keys, let's make this familiar again. They didn't have the keyboard is better. I am now so relieved that I no longer have to say that there's no way in hell I can imagine myself buying a MacBook anytime in the future, because the keyboards of all the other MacBooks were just like I've been saying, a non-starter. This one, it's not a great keyboard. It's not even a particularly good keyboard, but it's an adequate keyboard at least. It won't be the reason if I don't buy another MacBook, it won't be specifically because the keyboard, which is not a deal breaker. Which is it sounds like the most faint praise, backhanded compliment I could possibly make. But really, I'm just excited by the fact that we have a workable keyboard, and that trackpad, that's got to be the biggest trackpad Apple has ever put on anything.
It is. So I remember the last time I compared the trackpad to the iPhone, and it was about iPhone size. Let's just put the iPhone on the trackpad today, and it's considerably. It's the iPhone plus an extra inch. You know, that's a big on the top. So it's the width of the iPhone's height, and it's maybe 3/4 of an inch taller. That's a big trackpad.
Yeah.
So maybe this was Apple's plan all the way along, though, right? Roll out all these changes that everybody's going to hate for 3 years. And then when we roll this machine out, we don't have to worry about them complaining about no Wi-Fi 6, no 720p.
Because as we all know, in business history, New Coke was such a shot in the arm for Coke Classic. It was worthy of emulation by the most valuable tech company.
All right, I'm going to type on it the first time. And what I'm going to do is a password, because passwords are my best way of judging accuracy on a keyboard, because if I have to retype the password a bunch of times, that drives me nuts. And I have very weird passwords, and I type them very fast.
Make sure you do it on camera so everybody can see.
Yeah, I just did by accident. It's okay. It's just a Wi-Fi password. It's not, you won't gain any real benefit. Yeah, it feels better. It doesn't, you're right, Andy. It's not the 15. It's not a Lenovo ThinkPad, but the 2015, but it's good.
It's almost twice the key travel, isn't it? Like 1.0,
1 millimeter.
1.08.
Yeah. And I actually like the spacing. So I think Ben Thompson on Stratechery had an interesting article today about Apple and the perils. Really, he talked about the perils of being dominant. He said, I don't like to use the word monopoly as a technical term, but in effect, Apple has a monopoly on iOS and macOS products. And he said the problem with that is people are going to continue to buy. They've sold more than $90 million worth of MacBooks since the keyboard debacle. People are going to continue to buy. You're not going to get the signal you would get if there were a choice, because even if people hate it, you can kind of kid yourself. Well, no, they like it. It's just a few loudmouths because they are buying it. So there's a peril, and I think that was his point, to being so successful. And this is nothing new. We've known this for some time.
So Ben is a genius, so far be it for me to second guess him. But it's not an exact parallel, but you have companies like Nintendo who, they make the Wii, and then they make the Wii U, and then they come back and they make the Switch. And the danger is, Apple takes these big swings. Steve Jobs used to call them Babe Ruth swings. And a lot of times they hit it. They don't make very few phones. They make very few computers. They don't work like Dell or HP. But when they miss, that ball goes flying by them. And that's the risk. And I don't want them to stop swinging, because a lot of times when they do take those swings, they make really innovative things. Like I think the Force Touch trackpad, that was a risk. They made the best trackpads in the business, and they re-engineered them. And you can debate whether you like the size or not, but I think from a technological point of view, these new touchpads are way better than what they had before. And they had the same confidence level going into these keyboards. And one of their issues is that they get pushback on almost any change. If they don't change anything, people say they're not innovating. But when they do change things, people don't like it because we're change adverse. And sometimes they're going to be right, and the new way is going to be better. And after like a couple days of us getting used to it, we'll say, hey, I kind of like this. But when it's wrong, they're still in the mentality of, they're just still getting used to it, and they're going to see the same things, the same good qualities that we see in it, they're going to see in it. And that just makes, when it's wrong, they double down on the wrong, and then it takes them an extra cycle to get back on and rebuild a keyboard or something.
So in light of that, this is a pretty amazing thing for a company like Apple, a dominant company, a very, very successful company, to say, yeah, maybe we did make a mistake. Now, they're not going to say that out loud because all the other MacBooks still have the old keyboard. But I think it's new Coke unprecedented that Apple would say, okay, we give.
They rolled back on the RAM too. Like they were all in on low power RAM, and just the LPDDR4 did not come, and it did not come. Yep. And now they've gone back to DDR4 RAM, and they've had to increase battery to compensate for it. But they've gone up to like 64 gigabytes of RAM, 8 terabytes of SSD. They also, they thought that we're going to get to 10 nanometers, and they thought we're going to get to 10 nanometers, and we're still not at 10 nanometers. So now they've redone the thermals, and they could always burst. They could always deliver the i9 at burst speeds, but now they can deliver it for longer sustain as well. So in many ways, it's a regression, and it's a very pragmatic regression given the lack of advancement in the silicon that I think that they were counting for. And they've also done a really good job in totally abstracting away that silicon. So if you look at a modern Mac, it's got a layer of metal onto it, and most people wouldn't realize when it's hitting those GPUs or the CPUs. And they're shoving a bunch of stuff onto the T2 chip now, like HEVC encode decode, that still doesn't work well on Intel. So they're shoving all that onto what's equivalent to an A10 processor inside the computer. And it's sad because I'd love to see a Mac where we did get 10 nanometer Cannon Lakes like 3 years ago, and DDR4 2-3 years ago. But I think this is them fixing their mistakes and also doing their best to work around the general lethargy of x86 silicon.
It sounds like they for the most part kind of took the turn in the correct direction. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yep.
Yeah. They turned
away from the ground, away from the mountains, into the sky.
Now, having typed a little bit, and I have to say a little bit on this keyboard, yeah, you're right, Andy. It's not the 2015 keyboard. I did on iFixit. They said, oh yeah, it's pretty much identical. It doesn't feel like that. The travels.
It has a different. So the scissor mechanism is very similar to the Magic Keyboard that comes with the iMac. They just had to re-engineer it because the iMac keyboard is slightly angled and this one is flat.
Right.
And what they ended up doing, because they still really, really believe in not having it be very loose if you hit it on the sides. So they re-architected the rubber. It's gone back to using a rubber dome, and they re-architected slightly so that when you get to max up key travel, you got to punch a little bit to push it back down, and that equalizes the stability for them.
It feels pretty good. It's not. It definitely seems a little bit quieter. I think you nail it, Andy. It's good enough.
Yeah, it's not a bad keyboard at all. It doesn't distinguish itself either way. And again, after the past few iterations, I'm happy with it. Just not, you're hoping when you get behind the wheel of a new car that the steering wheel doesn't surprise you at all.
Right.
You don't want to see any innovation there.
Right.
You want to see a round thing that responds to you doing this to it. And the keyboard is, I think, the exact same thing. You really can't, quote, innovate, unquote, because you're taking away the best feature of that component, which is consistency and reliability, in the face of whatever mandate you think that you're pursuing there.
I point you to Marco Arment's blog post, Marco.
He came in with calipers, Leo. It was the most amazing thing.
He's pretty happy. He said he had a list, a wish list to fix the MacBook Pro, many of which were not, fixed. But he says, really, it came down to the keyboard for me, and they fixed that. So he says, I couldn't be happier. They didn't move the headphone jack to the other side, and some of the things he was hoping for. I'm on cloud 9. Look at this glorious keyboard, an escape key, inverted T arrow keys, a millimeter of key travel. It's funny. It's funny that we were talking about it as if the heavens have opened. But the truth is, I think a lot of people, I'll include myself, want to use MacBooks. We want to love MacBooks. We love Mac OS, and we want to use MacBooks. And for Apple to do something so, as Ben Thompson called it, user hostile with the keyboard, was a real showstopper.
That was a showstopper.
Like if Microsoft makes a bad keyboard, you can just go buy a Dell or go buy a Lenovo or go buy anything else. If you want to use Mac OS, you can't. You're stuck with whatever Apple gives you, and that's a far greater responsibility.
Right. Yeah, that's a real challenge.
That didn't upgrade for several years, right? Because of this, and held on, hoping for this moment, but not necessarily expecting it. When it came, like you, a lot of folks, I think, thought we were into 2020 before we saw this. And so I think they're going to sell a lot of these, but I think they would have sold a lot more of the previous iteration had they not taken this particular detour. But we would have found something else to complain about. So,
we always will.
We always.
I would have boycotted, but I did keep my 2015 for many more years than I would have liked to. But kind of as part of the job, I bought the MacBook. I bought a MacBook i9 MacBook Pro last year. I bought a MacBook Air. Ended up using only the MacBook Air because that seemed to have the least undesirable keyboard. But I'm ready to retire all of the above for this one.
I should point out that there are some people who are really angry about people who love.
Are there?
I like the butterfly keyboard. I didn't love it, but my Twitter feed is filled with. They better not have changed the keyboard. I'm not going to go back to the old feel. I hated those old key. And Apple will tell you they have a segment of people who really love it, and I really like it, but I still maintain that it's not. Nobody hated the old keyboard, and you can't have a keyboard, again, with one manufacturer that some people really like and others actively hate its breathing guts. That's just not tenable for a single vendor product. But there are a group of people who are angry and put out by the return to the mushiness of the keyboard. I think that's hilarious, but they exist.
has to be a minority.
No, when you look at the actual numbers, like again, Apple won't disclose them, but these sold better than any. What Apple
they sold well,
did
but again, that's what Ben Thompson was saying. They're going to sell well because there are people who have to have a Mac.
What Ben was wrong is that they sold well, they sold astronomically better because there was a huge amount of people who wanted a MacBook Air Pro, but Apple just did not provide a MacBook Pro on top of that. But that's not a very large segment. They sold well, people really liked them, but they had. I still maintain it doesn't matter if it's like 50% of people liked them. You can't have a keyboard that 50% of people hate.
But it doesn't work. And Rene, I think that you hit it on the head earlier by talking about it's harder because Apple really doesn't have any competition in the notebook or desktop space. Because let's face it, you can't buy Mac OS hardware that is not made by Apple. Yeah. So it's very, very easy to point to numbers that say, well, look, we're still selling lots of them. Look how many pre-orders there are for the new one. Hey, look how excited people are for our new innovative cylindrical Mac Pro. See, we are building things. We do our research. We do our homework. We're not just simply doing style over substance. We are building things that people want. But it's hard to get the numbers on. Yes, but imagine that there was a simple, very dull, gray, even beige metal box with the power and the expandability that people wanted for $300 less. Then see how much people are appreciating your innovation and how much they love the cylindrical design and the lack of a fan and the lack of upgradability. So yeah, that's Apple. Apple is unique. That's one of the reasons why we love them so much. They do so many things that no other company can possibly do. But of course, that does come with problems that no other company really has to deal with.
And responsibilities.
They put it on the spoon, and we have to eat it. There's no that's just how it is. We don't get to hold the spoon. We don't get to see where the spoon was before. We just take it when they put it in our mouths, and we say thanks. Can we please have some more?
Please, sir. Have some more. Exactly. I love it. Anyway, I'm very happy. I haven't heard the speakers yet. Should I play something through the speakers?
It's like a mini HomePod, Leo. It's really remarkable.
Yeah. Especially with how flat that damn thing is. Like,
I'm
where are they
still
getting
going
the sound
through
from?
the interminable setup, and I'm trying to do this, while we're talking. I'm almost done. I think I just chose dark mode.
They put Dave could explain this better than I could, but they put subwoofers back to back and drivers back to back to cancel out the vibrations while keeping the audio, which just sounds
because you don't want a machine that's shaking while you're listening, to Kanye. So
well, no, that makes sense, right? Because if you put it out of phase, then that way it would keep the thing from.
But
being
shifted. It still sounds like bass. Which
Correct.
Is interesting.
Yeah.
All right, I have to think about.
It makes sense.
Because I need to play.
I didn't realize they'd done that. That's pretty cool, Rene.
Yeah, I need to play.
It goes 2 levels deeper on that. I forget what the scale is, but it goes 2 levels lower on bass than the previous one.
Immediately, there's updates available, of course.
And they said because they know where your head is in relation to it, they don't have to do everything that a HomePod does because a HomePod tries to fill the entire room. It doesn't know where you are, so it has to try to spatially place things. But this has Dolby Atmos. It has the Apple system, the custom system that works to make non-Atmos content sound more like Atmos. And it does all of it assuming you're generally sitting in front of it with your head, positioned over it, so it can play sound in 3 dimensions around you.
All right. Yeah. I'm already a subscriber to Apple Music.
Are you looking for Kanye, Leo?
I'm just trying to get some Kanye, as one does.
I was using John Williams.
You could use some churching up.
Well, yeah. Part of the problem is YouTube now is really finicky about the use of any commercial music at all. So.
Oh, it's the COPPA stuff, Leo. Can't even upload to YouTube most days now because the COPPA warnings pop up so often.
Are your shows child attractive?
No, but it doesn't say that. Like, it's just like warning this, warning that. Like, you go to our new uploader. New uploader's not working. Doesn't load in. Error.
I'm a little nervous about that. We probably have kids watching.
And the laws are ambiguous, which is the best thing you want when you draft new laws about this kind of stuff.
All right. What should I play? Let's see. What did I listen to last night? The Beach Boys. That doesn't. Shall I play some Beach Boys? What? It needs to have some bass.
Wouldn't it be nice?
How about some? Yeah, but I can't.
If
right?
You played some Beach Boys. Oh, right.
Something,
you can't.
Classical. Yeah, but even then, there's
the 1812 Overture.
All right.
I'll give you permission to play a Fling song, Leo. I have the rights to grant that permission because I happen to know the songwriters.
Okay,
playing a band.
It's on Apple Music, though, Dave. Is it?
You got to play my album, and you got to play Rene's album.
Yeah, well, I could say now, a couple of months in on that 16-inch MacBook Pro, I love it. Apple did everything right. What a great keyboard. It's super fast, super quiet. I agree with Rene. The sound that comes out of that 16-inch MacBook Pro is great. I waited all year for Apple to announce the 16-inch, gave up. I thought they'd never do it. They finally did, and I guess we should end this Best of MacBreak Weekly with a big thank you to Apple. You've made it a very interesting year. I hope you've enjoyed these little clips, these memories from 2019. We love doing MacBreak Weekly, and we'll be back just a week or two from now. Let's see, this is, next week. We'll be back with Andy, Rene, Lory, Gil, and MacBreak Weekly. We'll see you then. Bye-bye. And happy holidays. Happy New Year.